All right, thanks for staying with us so far. It's TVC Breakfast. Now it's time for Talk Time. Nigeria has not had it rosy in the international community as a result of perceived high level of corruption in the country. The Corruption Perception Index places the country. Well, now there are reports that President Muhammadu Buhari is planning to set up special courts to try cases of corruption. The president is reportedly looking for fearless judges, courageous judges, incorruptible judges, and has plans to send a bill for the formation of the courts to the National Assembly. In the house this morning are two gentlemen. I have a lawyer, journalist, and lecturer of literature at the Lagos State University, Magneza Fasiun. I have to emphasize that very well because he had to correct me.
Thank you. Very
All right,
well.
you're welcome on the show this morning.
Thank you for
I also
having me.
have another lawyer and justice defender, Kennedy Osunwa, in the studio, who I can take the liberty of describing as a friend of the house. He's not a new face here on TVC. You're welcome to the show.
Yes, good morning, Nigerians.
Yes, so we're talking anti-corruption courts. The president will be sending a bill very soon to the National Assembly. Let me start with you, Mr. Fasim. Do we really need these anti-corruption courts, seeing that we do have the regular courts? Why do we need this anti-corruption courts?
Well, let me start by saying that we do not need a special court to try corruption. And for us to be able to elucidate on that assertion, like Achebe will say in one of his essays, you know, the novelist as a teacher, that we must be able to determine where the rain began to beat us. Corruption had been part of the Nigerian history from colonial, pre-colonial, colonial period, and post-colonial. And it has been the preoccupation of the Nigerian writers to say that, you know, if you read Achebe's No Longer Artist, for instance, that talks about the hero that comes back from England, and by the time he gets to the airport, he sees some people collecting money, custom officers collecting money. That's at the beginning of the novel. By the time you get to the end of the story, you know, the guy ends up collecting 20 pounds. And Umofia Progressive Union, who sent him abroad, asked him that if the guy had taken some good money, that would have been better for him, because if you really want to eat a toe, you eat a fat and juicy one. So we want to be able to look at the African perception of what is corruption, actually. And then you look at in my career as a media practitioner, I had to speak with Pastor Adeboye. I think it's one of the topics in one of the interviews was that Nigerians are corrupt. Nigerians are rotten from top to bottom. And if you look at that novel again, we get back to that novel. The novel says that when Obi Okonkwo, the central character in the novel, is being sent to jail, Mr. Green, the white man, says that Nigerians are corrupt through and through. Why Achebe decided to use the name of the white man as Mr. Green, symbolizing Nigerian flag color or something, it's left to the imagination. And I want to say that you know, it has been part of us. I can't see anything. And then when you now want to go into judicial process, I don't see how corruption cases are particularly different from ordinary crime. People have misunderstood the former president in saying that corruption is the same thing as stealing.
Or that stealing is not corruption. That was what he said.
So whichever semantic way people want to look at it, it's important for us to recognize that corruption has been here and it's diverse. Are we talking about corruption in public places? Are we talking of corruption in private lives? Now, private lives, there are several areas of our lives, you know, where you have corruption. And so, you know, you want to look at, if you are looking at it from the point of view of considering, you know, a court to want to look at corruption cases, I'm afraid that we might have to go the whole gamut of wanting to look at everybody, because I doubt if the system itself is not endemic in corruption.
Mr. Osunwa, what do you think?
Well,
are you on the same page with him?
Well, respectfully, I would want to differ, because my position has always been that we cannot be saying that corruption has been part of Nigeria. It is time for this government to stamp out corruption where necessary. And in doing that, there are certain issues that must be considered And the issue, one of the pertinent issues here is the issue of the forum to be used to fight corruption. And of course, the president, even before the president said it, I am one of those that has proposed 2 courts, special courts. They want to try corruption cases, and the constitutional court to try the election matters. However, we know that establishment of courts must be constitutional. It must be established by the Constitution.
Which is why, of course, it's sending a bill to the National Assembly.
Yes, it must be
established. For it to have that backing.
It must be established by the Constitution. Because if you look at some other courts, all the courts, not even some other courts, please.
The regular courts.
All the courts, yes, the regular courts, not by... they are all product of the Constitution. But however, while he is sending a bill to the National Assembly for the establishment of a special anti-graft court, especially to try corrupt cases. I think also that in order not to waste time or to be swift about it, I think that the chief judges of each state and the chief justice of Nigeria, the CJN, I think they should come together and create a division of a court that will try corrupt cases. Because of course, like we lawyers, myself, I'm a courtroom lawyer. And when you are a courtroom lawyer, you will know that if you go to court, there are so many cases that linger. In a day, you go, you see the cost list. You see that there are some judges that in their cost list for that day, they will have up to 30, 40 cases.
Of course, that's been one of the arguments for the whole concept of this creation of special courts, the delays in the regular courts, and at the end of the day, you don't get any justice, eventually. Now, the president says he wants incorruptible, principled, fearless judges who will not do a wishy-washy job for him. He's been quoted as saying that. Where... like some people have asked, where will he get these judges from? Considering the fact that now we have found out that security agencies have carried out some checks on some of the 100 judges that had been picked to hopefully, preside over this special court, and some of them have been found wanting. What does that say in itself?
I think that the benefit of the doubt should be given to those who may know that it's important for the president himself to know that when he wants to talk about issues of legal issues, he has to tread with caution. He has to do about with trepidation. I.e. that what is the court system? What is the Nigerian legal system about? At what point do you begin to say that offenses are indictable or non-indictable? At what point do you begin to take a case to magistrate court, to high court, to court of appeal, and so on and so forth? And then when you go into the Nigerian legal system, those of us who, if you have been to the Nigerian Council of Nigerian Law School, gone through the Nigerian Law School at the Nigerian Council of Legal Education, you have civil litigation, you have criminal litigation, you have property litigation, you have commercial litigation. And in going about all these things, I'm not sure it is possible for us to isolate any one of them and say, this is the area where you're likely going to encounter corruption. All right? And so, if you're going to say that, like we have divisions, you have courts that are specialized into handling commercial cases in Lagos, civil cases and criminal cases and, what have you. But the question is that when you're looking at corruption, as a factor. The tendency for us who are also coming from the media, media background, when you want to cast the headline in a newspaper, somebody has just filed an application. This is my experience. Somebody has just put up an application at the court, and a reporter, a judicial reporter, who has been to court, has a copy of that material,
yes.
And he gets to the newsroom. He wants to cast, I'm talking from the perspective of, those of us who are coming from the print media. And then the first thing you want to do is you want to cast the headline as Ngozi drags Makenza to court. The perception of the Nigerian, of the reader, of the audience, is that, oh, this person is in for trouble. And it should be incumbent on the Nigerian media to also enlighten, and that's why we have a forum like this, to enlighten the Nigerian public. That, for instance, if an EFCC has invited you, in the course of investigation, in itself, it's not an indictment.
Yes, I do understand what you're saying. That the general perception is
exactly
when the EFCC invites a person or whatever, we assume that he is guilty or whatever.
All right.
Okay.
And the banks, for instance, when certain amount of money is lodged in the bank, it is expected that the EFCC should be notified when it gets to certain amount of money. That's a practice. Now, whereas at a lower level, issue of, as of yesterday, the Nigerian, the consumer, the power consumer, electricity consumers, group, we're talking about estimated billing, which is corruption in itself. When the government comes into place and he wants to regularize issue of electricity and eliminate corruption in that kind of sector, the first thing a government wants to do is to ensure that there are meters for everybody. And the meters are read accordingly, because when the disco guys came to my house yesterday, and they gave me a bill of about 37,000, and I said, for God's sake, you have to come to this house to look at the appliances that are here.
Okay, so
things like that.
Yeah.
These are issues that if you don't want to say that you want to go into, establishing corruption cases, the signification, the semiotics to the Nigerian, to the audience is that, oh, this person has to be, convicted anyhow, willy-nilly. And that's not the part of justice.
Whether there's proof or not that they have been found to be corrupt.
To the extent that Nigeria is an accusatorial jurisdiction. By accusatorial jurisdiction, it means that an accused person is presumed innocent until he's proven guilty. In an inquisitorial jurisdiction, the accused person is presumed guilty until he's able to establish his innocence. So even when you are prosecuting, even when you are going to court to prosecute as a prosecutor, onus of prosecution is on you to prove that case beyond reasonable doubt that this person has committed so. So if it is within the platitude of the expectation of the Nigerian public that once an individual has been said to be corrupt, that person has to be convicted willy-nilly, you are likely going to have a contradiction between misplacement of justice and the expectation of the Nigerian people. Because as far as we are concerned, when we are talking of corruption here, without getting to know the texture, the strands of legal procedure, is that once you have been shown on television to be going through trials with respect to corruption, you are guilty. Okay,
so that brings us to the question of defining exactly what we mean by corruption.
That's right.
Have we even been able to define what corruption we're talking about here, Mr. Osungwa? Are we talking about corruption in the public sector or in the private sector? Are we talking about the man on the street who goes and steals goat or something? Do you understand?
Yeah.
And what impact it has on the next person? What do we exactly mean by corruption here?
You see, the truth is that when you perpetrate an act that is not in tandem with the provisions of the Constitution, it is already an offense. Once the court establishes that, it is an offense. Right. If you also do by court or leave undone what you ought to do, or refuse to follow procedures that you ought to follow to do certain things or to arrive at a particular point, is also corruption. But having said that, I think the corruption that we are talking about here is the corruption that is affecting the common man. the corruption that is affecting the government structure, the corruption that is affecting the dividends of democracy. Once these...
Or dividends of governance.
Or governance. Our governance is democracy. That is our system for now.
Yeah.
So once that is seen to be a clock, then suffice it to state that it is corruption.
Okay, now let's come back to this issue of setting up of anti-corruption courts. Some people have expressed fears that setting this up could become, you know, kangaroo courts for the bidding of the government of the day. Is there a danger of that?
Well, the question is that, the fear has been expressed. How we sure? You're talking about 100 people. As at the last count, the president had presented about 36, nominated 36 people, you know, from the grapevine, and publishing in the papers, you know, for ministerial appointment. Only 3 out of the 36, all right, were able to say through. And so when you are talking about the parameters for corruption, that's why the judicial system is so composed in such a manner that a court should be constituted in a manner that will guarantee its independence and impartiality. That's a baseline for establishing a court. That court must be constituted in a manner that will guarantee its independence and impartiality. Having done that, and when we talk about corruption, this corruption case, we look at Nigerian history. What happened to, what led to the Nzogoku, for instance? We're talking about 10%ers. I.e. that people issue a contracts, and when they do that, they collect 10% of the amount, of the total value of the contract. But in Nigeria today, we have as much as about 90%. The governor has issued a contract, he has taken about 40% out of it from the source. The commissioner takes like about 30%, that's 70% gone. You are the contractor and whoever is going to be the foreman or whatever are left with just about the foreman or the contractor or the guy who has the LPO, perhaps, has taken about 20%, so the contractor is left with 10% to construct a road. And then when he fails to construct the roads, nobody has a moral pedestal to ask him, why didn't you do that? Because the gamut of corruption had happened from top to bottom. But the thing is that the people who get into civil service and perpetrate these acts or omission, like my colleague has rightly mentioned, because when we are talking about crime, you are talking about an act or omission that has adversely affected the life or limb or property of somebody else, of a third party. And then whether the third party is the Nigerian public, whether it is collectively affecting all of us, as in bad roads that had been awarded as contract, you get to the secretariat, the Ministry of Land and Housing, and you find out that certain roads had been said to have been tarred long ago, but hitherto the roads are still there. Now the question is that, how do you begin to bring people to book, all right, other than trying them through common criminal cases? Because these are basic criminal cases. These are basic criminal cases, all right. And then when you get into the legal procedure, how do you take somebody that has that is in the public office, all right? How do you distinguish that from somebody? Because by the time you're talking about you listen to Fela, that's why sometimes when I discuss law, I look at it from an artistic point of view. And Fela talks about issue of argument. You know, you be thief, I be thief. And talks about pen robbery, armed robbery. All right? Armed robberies don't... Once you take anything with menaces, you obtain anything with menaces. In criminology, that is crime. All right? And then when you are aided by either your gun or your pen or whichever, that describes the kind of robbery you have been into. And so, common things that are criminal issues, we window dress, we dress it in such a manner and make it look like, oh, the guys, these are cheap criminals. The moment you do things that is contrary to what the law says, like my friend has just said, it's not just about the Nigerian Constitution, all legislation, bylaws, you know, acts of the, you know, Houses of Assembly. When once you have done something that, you know, infringes on the right, of the life, the limb and property of somebody else, all right, those are criminal acts. Lately, we have been having cases in which there have been road accidents on Nigerian roads, all right? when we are talking about the justiciability or otherwise of the Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution, which is the fundamental objective and directive principle of state policy, what does government owe the Nigerian people?
Making sure that the road is in good condition.
Is it possible for us to take the Nigerian government to court? All right? And so these are the issues that we really want to look into. And when Section 308 of the Nigerian Constitution says that, you know, that save and except as provided in this Constitution, nobody shall institute a legal or, criminal or civil cases, you know, against, or there shall be no continuous or initiation of legal or, you know, civil proceedings against the people that is covered by this Section 308, which is what is otherwise known as the immunity clause. There's corruption there. Even when you get into civil cases, as in piracy, for instance, copyright, for instance, and then you need to go to court to go and apply for an antopila order to stop somebody who has pirated your materials and is in a warehouse in Mushin to do that. These are basic criminal things. Okay,
let's move on to this specifics now that we're talking about. Let's assume the president does get his, you know, this fearless judges. What about the basics here? The police doing a thorough job in terms of investigations, you know, the prosecutor or prosecuting lawyer doing the right thing and all of that. If they don't do their jobs at that level, how much can the judge, who is fearless and incorruptible, do, Mr. Osungwa?
You see,
or will the case not be dead on arrival?
You see, that's why in one of my interviews here, I did state, and I will continue to state, I will continue to say it. In fact, that is the reason why I am, you know, supporting the president on this issue of special courts. And also, I have also said that if the president is creating a special court, the president should also ensure that the prosecution or the agencies that are involved in prosecution of those cases must undergo training and retraining and make sure that that agency or the agencies involved are sanitized. Because what you see in the regular course today is that they come. Today they are coming with this charge today. Tomorrow they are bringing application to amend the charges. And by the time you look at the charges, it's very watery. And by the time it passes through the eyes and the needle of evidence and adjudication, you find out that the man or the accused man is bound to go home and sleep in his air-conditioned room. Now, I have taken statistics and records of so many cases that the EFCC has been prosecuting. My learned friend have stated Section 308 that precludes executive governors from being prosecuted. But after their tenure, the law allows them to be prosecuted. And based on that, the EFCC have been in the forefront or in the forerunner of doing a good job of arresting them, all these high-profile cases here and there. But the question is the prosecution.
And many have said that where the real problem is that our laws are basically archaic. And so some of these lawyers and even the bench are able to, you know, use some of these loopholes or weaknesses in our legal system to allow this criminals in court or public looters to, you know, get away with murder, so to speak.
It's always very easy for people to...
Okay, maybe before you... okay, we have Karim from Taraba. Hello, Karim. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, my dear sister.
Yes.
Good morning to all the gentlemen in the studio.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
In fact, Mr. Osuma, kudos to you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, the issue of corruption, I seriously support the idea of setting a special court for corruption cases.
That's right.
Just like the president said, if you didn't kill corruption, corruption will kill all of us. It is as a result of the corruption situation we find ourselves that we find things difficult for all of us. I'm not talking to any particular aspect or people in the country. All of us in Nigeria. If we allow corruption, so many, now look at the economy of the country. Very few people manipulated the money of this country. They pocket the whole money, take it to their foreign accounts, and begin to enjoy a bad day. You see, imagine somebody giving his child or her child a jet instead of just a bad day. Please, what are we doing? What are we doing? We better clear this corruption. We better stampede this corruption. We better finish with corruption. Else, we will go nowhere. We will stand still. And if you look at this, is a great country. The country is very rich. It's a rich country that we have enough money. The resources is there. But you see, because we are corrupt, those of us at the head of the affairs, they manipulated the whole thing. They pocket the money that is due for the millions of Nigerians. They take it for their own selfish this thing. So my contribution here, I seriously support the corruption cases to be tried separately from the conventional case.
All right, Karim from Taraba, thank you very much. So, do we need? Shouldn't we really be looking at strengthening the regular law courts and maybe reforming the judicial system?
Honestly,
I guess that's the line of question.
That's my position, actually. I.e. that you're talking about the EFCC as an investigating body with prosecutorial power to prosecute, power to investigate. In the course of investigation, these are human beings. When you talk about strengthening institutions, like we usually say, that's why the philosopher Aristotle will say that history deals with particular facts and art deals with universal truth. Because when you're talking about the artistic point of view, he looks at it from a very holistic point of view, that the EFCC as a body, for instance, is made up of human beings. And when, for instance, there was an incident that happened to me personally, from personal experience, there was a noise pollution in my environment, and I had to go to the police station to report. And the police officer asked me, how do we get there? Are you with a car to get there? The question is that if I hadn't come there with a car, that would definitely affect investigation.
All right, you'll finish that thought shortly. Yeah. Let's take Ogaba from Benue. Hello, Ogaba. Good morning to you.
Yes, my sister, and good morning. And regards to the guests in the studio, I want to stay in the camp of Mr. Osoma, because McNair is trying to trivialize this issue of corruption, and that is where the problem has always been. Trivial. We discuss corruption as if it is children's business. Look, a drastic situation needs drastic solution. You can't give a malaria drug to what is it called? You can't prescribe a malaria drug for whatever or for any other illness. It has to be for malaria. I have said before, my submission is that corruption is a crime against humanity. It's a crime against the state. Because look at the number of people who have died. If you do a true assessment, how many people have died? How many people? Look at the number of unemployed youths in Nigeria. All this thing is because of corruption. And you need to assess a corrupt-minded person. What does he think of? He doesn't think anything. 24 hours a day, he's thinking of corruption. How can a nation go 170 million people thinking of corruption 24 hours? Well, then what is our productivity? What is our output?
Okay, thank you very much, Ogaba. I'm afraid that that's how much we can take from you. We have to try and be as brief as possible so that we can get enough in. So we're talking about the need to strengthen the you know, the legal system,
because
regular courts and the judicial system.
You're talking about a police officer that doesn't have equipment, he doesn't have access to internet. When a crime is being committed somewhere, we are talking about Freedom of Information Act that has just been passed not too long ago, and I had to go to those to talk about it, you know, to the bureaucracy. You are looking at access to information technology. You get to court, for instance, you want to look at your cost list in them, you know, when you get to court. Well, how do you do that? You have to file as a lawyer, get to the clerk, open the files, and stuff like that. Whereas, if we were to be internet savvy, if we were to be information technology compliant, we probably won't need some of those things. And I feel that when you are talking about going to court, for instance, issue of the tendency, the expectation of the Nigerian public, that's that much we have heard from the people that have just contributed, i.e. that the moment you have a case of allegation, petition against you, it is expected from the public expectation that you have to be nailed willy-nilly. And you see, justice doesn't work that way. All right? And that is why when you go to study law, you look at jurisprudence, you look at different thoughts of school of thinking, the historical tradition, the Scandinavian, the American, and all that, before you be able to know exactly what is justice. Now, when you are talking about strengthening institutions, what the president has just said with respect to what the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission had been doing, I think that's the kind of thing we are talking about. I would want to look at as a way of tackling corruption. Because if you don't monetize politics, in the First Republic, for instance, the Nigerian professors were any more than the ministers. But the reverse is the case today, until President Obasanjo came back and reinvented the middle class. At the point in time in our history, the middle class was extinct. Are you with me? It's either you had money or you didn't have anything at all. And so, as much as possible, when you talk about corruption today, you look at the bills that political class, office holders are making. You understand what I'm saying? Then it becomes a do-or-die thing.
All right, let's take Mohammed from Niger before I come to Mr. Osungwa on the need to strengthen institutions. Okay, we lost that connection there. Mr. Fasehun has just talked about the application of technology. I'm thinking here, as soon as you said that, how about actually preventing corruption, especially in public office, or whether it be even in the private sector, as against curative.
Yeah.
Prevention has always been better.
Actually, in medicine
prevention has always been better than cure.
In medicine in the 21st century, you talk about preventive medicine more than curative medicine.
Absolutely.
Because,
So what should we be thinking about in terms of making sure that whoever is given, I mean, we're going to have ministers very soon.
Yes.
You cannot guarantee that all these men will be 100% men of integrity or women of integrity for that matter. But how about making sure that systems are in place that will prevent them from their proclivity to, putting their hands in the public till? How about, isn't that where we should be also thinking?
It's also a welcome development in the sense that if the ministers come on board, for instance, if you look at various ministries, you will see that corruption there comes in a way of contract award and inflating contract sums. Now, there's what we call tenders board. Every contract that must be awarded, the tender must be made open, public, for transparency to prevail. And the contractor or whosoever that has, been contracted to execute that contract must also periodically show what he has done, what he's going to do, and any form of mobilization should also be made public.
All right, let me take this call from Kunle, who is calling us from Kaduna. Hello, Kunle. Good morning to you.
Hello.
Philip.
It's Philip, not Kunle.
Okay, Philip, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. The issue of establishing another court to check corruption, I think, is in itself corruption. We have to, take time to consider this. if the conventional court has not failed, then what's the need for another court? You know, the issue is we have to, like, I like what your contribution. You talked about strengthening the other court. You know, we have to strengthen the other court, I mean the conventional court that we have. Because the corrupt leaders are the common criminal in the street. You know, other common criminals are tried in the conventional courts. Why can't we try others? I mean, and our leaders, the corrupt leaders, as the conventional criminals. They are criminals. They are toying with the public funds.
Okay, Kunle, thank you very much. Kunle there from... He's brought another dimension to it. He says... Phillips, why am I so fixated with Kunle this morning? He thinks that setting up this anti-corruption court is corruption in itself.
That's my position.
He's thinking, by extension, have we accepted that the regular courts have failed and we're not really doing anything about it?
First of all, ab initio, I don't agree with Philip at all. Then also, I want to state that the regular courts, as far as I'm concerned, because I am still practicing, this regular court has not failed. But what you find, like I said earlier on, is like what Lagos State is doing, appointing more judges because of the workload. For instance, where a judge a day, you have about 32, 40, 50 cases. At the magistrate level or the magistracy, you have 70 cases at one day. I mean, even if it's a computer, you cannot get the best from that person. And that is why I've looked at... Okay, don't forget also that the regular court has equally tried some of these corrupt cases, the high-profile ones, in quotes. Until today, it's either we are not hearing what has happened on that case, or the case is suspended, or the case is still going on. For instance, there are a lot of governors. Otumba Lawakala is also contesting. The former Otumba 2 that is in Ogun State is there. The case is there. They have taken the other man or Hakim the other day. We've not had anything. Monetary Yako, we've not had anything. So many cases like this. The Reverend Father, is it Taraba also? We've not had anything. These cases are there. They've been in the regular courts. So I think that is what the president have looked at and said, no, there must be a drift. Now let us establish a court. For instance, I said, I've advised the president, even if to establish the anti-graft court will take some time due to the constitutional bureaucracies, the chief judges of every state and the CJN can come together in alliance and they establish divisions, which there is nothing. Because even in the normal courts, there are divisions for land.
All right, let me take this call
matrimonial causes. Let's
take Jimo from Bauchi. Hello, Jimo. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, go on, please, with your contribution.
My little contribution is whether they organize a new court or not. To me, that's not the case. What really worries me is that this government is playing the whole system. Why is it taking them all this long to judge a open criminal? That everybody can prove that they are criminals. And it's taking the government the whole year to even come about how to treat them. I don't see what they had for them. That's what I'm worried about. It's just about if someone being you are being a governor or whatever you have been, that doesn't mean you're any special. You are a human being like any ordinary person. And the fact about it is that if the law is not there, everybody will commit a crime. It's simple as that. So there is no immunity for anybody. We are all equal. If you have been appointed, given a chance to lead this country and you corrupt, you use that opportunity to destroy the country, I see no reason why you will not be judged. If you are guilty, face your guilty. You just have to face it. That's just the thing.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Jimo from Bauchi there. Well, you heard him.
Yes, I listened to him,
yes.
and I want to react to that, expressly. When the president mentioned the fact that he would want a situation in which legal practitioners are not standing in for corrupt people, it's like putting the cart before the horse. And I had to say that in the media. I.e. that you have to know what justice is all about. Mm-hmm. When the maxim says justice delayed, it's justice denied. The corollary is that justice rushed is justice crushed. All right? An appeal case that is telling us that tells us an appeal case of Rondell and Worsley that talks to us about how a legal practitioner cannot determine the client, because the legal practice is like a cab. You could carry anybody. You're supposed to carry anybody, and by your training, you're supposed to carry anybody. All right? Whether you're looking at canonical laws or you're talking about, modern jurisprudence, it's about the fact that the legal practitioner is trained to attend to his clients. Are you with me? And then that case essentially started in 1959, and it didn't end until 1969. That's 10 years.
So let me get it clear here.
Yes.
If a public officer is accused
yes.
or alleged to be corrupt,
yes.
he still deserves defense.
Of course,
that is what you're saying.
That's
okay, let's take Shehu from Taraba. Hello, Shehu. Good morning.
Good morning, madam.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Good morning to you all. Please, my contribution is that I heard that the court is going to be established, but my main concern here is that even if the court has been established, the case may reach either a court of appeal or Supreme Court. So if the case is not going to end there, what's the essence of establishing the court? If the special court cannot finalize the case has to reach Supreme Court. So I see no reason why they should waste public money and establish another court while the case is not going to. Yeah. So that's my contribution.
All right, thank you very much.
So you see, like I was saying, if you are talking about rushing, if the expectation of the Nigerian public is that, somebody has been alleged to have done one or two things and he hasn't been convicted either two, all right, you might not have been privy to the facts of the case. And if you are really not, you are not in a position to discuss the facts of the case if you are not privy to the content. And that's why people who publish law reports make it incumbent for us, to read cases so that you know exactly what the cases are like. Now, when you talk about crime in Nigeria, crime of people who are politically exposed, that's the Nigerian concept of corruption. Corruption, like we have since found out, occurs in different layers of our national life, of our personal life, of our religious life. There are 5 ideas scientifically that affect the human condition, that regulate the human condition. You have the law, you have the morals, you have the religion, you have equity, and you have social convention. And I just mentioned social convention the other time, i.e. that what is the expectation of the Nigerian public? Somebody comes to a party and is paying dollars, and nobody knows exactly where he gets the money from. And then when you're talking about corruption, essentially, if you have a land, if you have a case like my colleague rightly mentioned, you have a court that is saddled with the responsibility of looking at land matters. Couldn't there have been cases of obtaining under false pretense, as enunciated in Section 418 of the Nigerian Criminal Code, punishable under Section 419? You understand what I'm saying? So these are issues that is, when you're talking about corruption, corruption is octopoda. It's pervasive. It gets into every area. So if you really want to say that you want to establish a court to want to try corruption, then you are probably narrowing yourself down to in jurisprudence. I don't know how you are going to manage that.
It actually brings me to what I read in the papers this morning. Cardinal Okoje recommending or advising government to actually have some kind of dialogue with some of these public looters. Because this would be a lot cheaper than actually going to court. You know, have some kind of agreement with them.
Essentially, this is what Professor Isesage has come up with.
Yeah.
If you are looters and you have something in your custody, could you please return them? And that is the essence of the Criminal Justice Act, you know, Law of Lagos State, you know, Administration of Criminal Justice Act of Lagos State, Section 75, Section 76. When you talk about the plea bargaining issue,
yes,
people look at plea bargaining as a safety valve, as an escape route for criminals to go out. But the essence is that if we're really going to go through the gamut of litigation, it is possible for the course of justice to have been perverted along the line.
So, Mr. Osunwa, can we save ourselves the costs of litigation, of taking these people to court by just, you know, cutting to the chase and reaching some kind of plea bargain with them? And so that we can move on, since we agree that this corruption we're talking about is actually endemic, it's pervasive. How many Nigerians will actually come before the special courts?
That is also permissible. But the fact remains that it is not going to be gentleman agreement. It must also be before the court, for the court to give that mediation or reconciliation the force of law. So when you say Luther come with this without a force of law behind it, nobody, an average Nigerian will not do that. An average Nigerian needs force. And that is why Lagos State has done well, be it at the magistracy, be it at the High Court, particularly the rules of High Court. Okay, we see that before a case goes for trial, there must be case management. That case management is all about mediation.
Let me take Emeka from Togo.
And 5 times.
Hello, Emeka from Togo. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Thanks for holding on, Emeka. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, please, they're trying to get the people for a long time. So I'm so happy this morning to be with you people this morning.
We're glad you did.
Yeah, please, my contribution is like this. Corruption in Nigeria today started from the government services. We are people living in Togo. When we are coming to Nigeria, we suffered a lot. It's like we are going to hell. We living in the country, coming to our own country, it's like we are slaves. You will see no less than 100 uncountable roadblocks. Those people, the police, the immigration, customs, they also have their own caliber they work with. You will be so much embarrassed. The immigration, so-called immigration, when you have your passport, they will tell you that this one is a virgin. They want to break it. They start calling you 2,000, 3,000, 5,000. They want to break a passport virgin. I don't understand what the meaning of breaking passport virgins. If you don't have a passport, they will like it. They will tell you to follow Bush. So they will collect more money. Last year, December, I was coming with my family. Even my children were raped of coming to Nigeria. We embarrassed a lot.
All right, Emeka, thank you very much. From you. Emeka, I wish I could let you go on, but we're constrained for time. Emeka from Togo there, he's painted the picture again of how pervasive this corruption is. But really, corruption, is it the disease or just a symptom of a more serious ailment? And we're seeing it play out in things like corruption. Mr. Osunwa.
Well,
are we fighting the symptom here rather than the disease?
The truth is that, like my learned brothers have said, corruption is all over the place. And the truth is that even the individual, that is myself and yourself and himself, we must purge ourselves. For instance, you see that these politicians that go there, when they get there, they say they want to represent their interests and my own interest. Whereas they are representing the interest of their pocket. Before they get there, it is also Nigerians that we take money from them to go and exercise their right of franchise. And by the time they spend that money, they will say when they get there, they will recoup their investments. And it's all corruption. Look at what Emeka is saying. I know that very well. It is what is happening. And that is why if one or two of them is being investigated, tried, convicted, and jailed, it will serve as a deterrent to others.
And speaking of that, what about the role of the whistleblower? We seem not to, be encouraging people to come out and say what they know, about corrupt people because of fear of intimidation or, or persecution or what have you. How can we ensure that the whistleblower is protected, or we even have such a concept?
We want to look at it from a multidimensional point of view. The concept of whistleblowing is like belling the cat. Who bells the cat? Who is going to petition? Who is going to blow the whistle? And that is the more reason why, when Emeka said, express his own sentiment about what is happening in Togo, it happened to me. All right? My son had to go abroad to study abroad. And out of all the students that were admitted, that he was the first to get the admission. And yet, the embassy here requires what is known as a certificate of valor. Certificate of valor implies that you have to pay certain amount of money for them, for the embassy, to go and check your results, to ensure that you actually have those results before you go to their country. Now, it is embarrassing, So, to the extent that everybody is anxious, all right, we can understand the sympathy. But when you are talking about issue of blowing the whistle, that is why the history, we have to look at the history of other countries that had surmounted this kind of thing. How did they do that? They did that ideologically. All right? Matthew Arnold of the Victorian age, when he wrote his essay in the function of criticism at the present time, he said there are two realms of human existence where you can have charlatanism and quackery, and that is in religion and politics. And so when you get into politics, when you get into religion, I mean, Shoyinka has written for us the trials of Badajero and has told us in the interpreter that man is always an apostate at any point in time. So even when an individual gets into government, innocently, there are factors of corruption there. That's why Obi could not survive in Achebe. Things fall apart. And that is why in Devota, for instance, one of the short stories in Gets At War, the guy swears to an oath, to a shrine, that he's going to vote for, a candidate B. And when he gets there, he collects money from here, collects money from here. When he got to the ballot box, he tore the paper into two and voted for the two of them. So this has been the dilemma of our cultural life. And up until we're able to address that, all right, we're just talking about fighting corruption. If an individual stands up today and we're talking so much about body language of President Buhari. If Buhari goes away, who else is going to have this body language?
Absolutely. So we cannot fight this war against corruption around an individual. It has to be an institutional thing. But is there a danger that this war against corruption can be politicized? Finally, on a final note.
Yes. And that's why, like, for instance, the president the other time said, okay, I only want to investigate President Jonathan's regime. And people like us, we are saying, in as much as we want you to fight corruption, but where you are fighting a sectional corruption, the signal might be very, very dangerous. That you want to fight corruption. We are no more in the military era, which, of course, it was a product. But then, now that we are being in a democratic setting, starts from President Obasanjo's era.
Okay.
Down the line, then we know that sincerely you are not being sectional.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Unfortunately, 1 hour is hardly enough to tackle an issue like this. Thank you so much to all our callers. And I want to say thank you very much, Makneza Fasiun, legal practitioner, and Kennedy Osungwa, also a legal practitioner, for joining us on the show this morning, talking about the setting up of the anti-corruption cases.